It's not the same as in person.
Welcome to A Mighty Blaze's Authors in Conversation. I'm your host, Jane Roper, and we have with us today two amazing historical novelists. We have Heather Webb and we have Sarah Penner, author of the hot, brand new debut novel, The Lost Apothecary. Welcome to you both, Heather and Sarah. Really happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Great to see you. So Heather Webb up here joining us from, I'm trying to gesture, but it doesn't, yeah, it's very disorienting. From sunny Connecticut, not so sunny Connecticut, sunny Connecticut.
It's sunny, actually.
Is it sunny? Okay, good. Yeah. She is the USA Today best-selling and award-winning author of 7 historical novels, including Rodin's Lover, Goodreads top pick, and Last Christmas in Paris, winner of the Women's Fiction Writers Association Star Award. Heather's newest novel, Meet Me in Monaco, written with Hazel Gaynor, is set in the 1950s against the backdrop of Grace Kelly's whirlwind romance and wedding to Prince Rainier of Monaco. Sounds very glam.
It is glam.
Yeah. I bet it was really fun to write that. Publishers Weekly calls it a scrumptious concoction served up with delectable descriptions and heaps of emotion. Heather's next solo novel, The Next Ship Home, is coming out next February. It is inspired by true events and reveals the dark secrets of Ellis Island as 2 unlikely friends challenge a corrupt system, altering their fate and the lives of the immigrants that come after them. That sounds awesome. To date, Heather's books have been translated into over a dozen languages. She lives with her family and 1 feisty rabbit. Will the rabbit be making an appearance? Probably not.
No, if my daughter was involved, yes, absolutely. But no.
We have had quite a number of pet appearances.
Oh, have you?
Yeah. Not never rabbits, though. That would be a first. So.
I should have brought him.
Yeah, well, next time. Sarah Penner is the debut author of The Lost Apothecary, which is just released by Park Row Books on Tuesday.
Yes.
Very exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It was named a most anticipated book of 2021 by Oprah Magazine, Newsweek, Good Housekeeping, Pop Sugar, Hello Magazine, Bustle, and more. Amy Myerson, best-selling author of The Bookshop of Yesterdays, describes it as an addictive, atmospheric novel about an apothecary who concocts poisons to help women exact revenge on their men, and the woman who uncovers her secrets over 200 years later. Book Page calls it spellbinding. Like in a well-brewed potion, all the ingredients have been given exactly the right level of care and time, and the result is a novel that simply overwhelms with its delicate spell. Born and raised in Kansas, Sarah currently lives with her husband and their miniature Dachshund. Dachshund. Is that what you say? Dachshund.
Dachshund. I think that's probably the German way, but Dachshund or Wiener Dog or Dachshund.
Yeah, Dachshund. Zoe.
I'm going with Wiener Dog on that one.
Yeah,
Wiener
Dog is most fun.
Yeah, with their Wiener Dog, Zoe. She has spent the last decade meaning Sarah, not the Wiener Dog, has spent the last decade in various corporate finance functions, a day job that she loves. So
yes, and I don't think she will be making an appearance either, because anyone who has dachshunds know that once they start barking, it's impossible to stop. So she's actually the closed door behind me. My husband's in his office in there with her, and this is sort of his role when I have these virtual events, is that he has to keep her from barking. So she probably won't be making an appearance.
Oh well, yeah, it'd be fun because like little scratch come.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome to you both. Glad to have you here. Take it away. And those of you who are watching, if you have questions, please put them up there. And if we have a chance toward the end, around 4:30-ish, we'll try to get some questions in, if not sooner. So
sounds great.
Good.
Guys.
So what you guys don't know is that I have known Sarah for several years online. I think it started with 5 a.m. Writers Club on Twitter, didn't it?
Yes.
You always respond when I would write something.
Well, I will just correct you.
Yeah, please do.
With one thing. And it's okay that you don't remember this, Heather, because I adore you and I'll forgive you. But in 2017, we very briefly met at the Historical Novel Society. I think in passing.
In St. Petersburg.
Actually, that was in Portland. So it might have been a different year, but it was when they did their conference in Portland. And I was a fledgling writer, like, did not know anything, was working on my very first manuscript that never got agented. So we just kind of passed like near the hotel bar, and that was the extent of our meeting. But then, yeah, like you said, we have gotten to know each other more so online than anything. So
yeah, and I have seen your pictures everywhere, but it's very fun to actually talk with you.
Yes.
Really talk with you besides email.
Yes.
So this was the launch of your debut. What's the week been like for you? I'm sure you're tired.
So
Yes. It's been fun. What's the exciting stuff going on?
It's funny because I'm a very high energy person. Like you, I'm an extrovert. I feed off of other people, but before we kicked off this call, I was saying that I am very mentally tired right now because there has been so much excitement, and it's good adrenaline, but it's still adrenaline, and it's still, you lay down at night to fall asleep and it's just like these weird visions and you're replaying conversations. And, my virtual launch event was last night and we had almost 500 people on that. And so that's just a lot of adrenaline to come down from right before you try and fall asleep. And then waking up today, and it's, I had a radio thing this morning, and then this, and then something tonight. So it's all really good stuff, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But to your point, it is a lot. And I'm looking forward. I have nothing on the calendar tomorrow, no events or engagements of any kind, and I'm going to sleep in. And I actually have a massage booked, so tomorrow will be awesome. But the whole experience, we sold the book to Park Row Books in November 2019. So it was about 8 or 12 weeks before the pandemic started. And knowing once the pandemic kind of kicked in and we realized people's book tours were canceled, no one was doing any events of any kind, even in their own towns, because bookstores were closed, libraries were closed. When I sort of realized that was the environment I was going to be debuting into, I was naturally disappointed. I think anyone would be.
Absolutely.
But then I kind of realized that there are a lot of silver linings to this virtual environment. And there's such a reach and breadth of readers that I've been able to meet virtually through these different events that people can attend for free and from wherever they're at in the world that wouldn't have otherwise been possible. So I think it just lends itself to when someone asks, how has the experience been? How has the week been? It's just been like up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's really just how you frame it up and what your perspective on challenges looks like. And if you can stay rested and kind of keep your head on straight. So that's everything I'm trying to do.
Have you been able to write at all the last couple of weeks?
The last couple of
weeks. The next book?
Not the last couple of weeks. I did. I wrote all through the pandemic. I very much actually found that to be kind of cathartic and a source of just contentment for me throughout the pandemic. Was working on a different project. The last few weeks, I haven't had time to write a word. I haven't read hardly anything, just because as the publicity ramped up, I just am not in that state to sit down on a couch with a book.
Tough.
Yeah.
Can't imagine. You'll get better at it, because there'll come a time when you're doing a deadline and a launch at the same time, and there's no choice.
When you said that you have when you've got a collaboration book coming out this summer and then your next solo book in February, just it stresses me out just hearing that, because I'm thinking, how does she do that?
How do you do that? Yeah.
It's a lot. I mean, I would prefer to have my solo book be out a little bit later, but, like another whole year out. But, at the same time, you get better at it. These 2 books publishing will put me at 7 novels published. So I think you learn to balance things better. You also figure out what to not spend your time on. And I think when you're a debut, and even like a first couple books, you spend your time doing a lot of things that either cost too much money and cost too much time, and they don't make a big difference in terms of getting your book out there. And so that is a really valuable thing I've learned over the years. And so it does get easier. But you know, it's still tiring. It's challenging, but it's super fun. It's so exciting.
Yeah, and I think to that point that you just said about learning what not to spend your time on, I actually just started making a list a few days ago, and at the top I wrote lessons learned, because this will happen again someday. I'll be in a similar situation, and I'm writing down things that I have spent my time on that I don't know were entirely value added, but then I'm also trying to write down things that I've really enjoyed. So, for example, some people who pre-ordered, I like hand stamped these book plates and signed them. And I realized maybe it doesn't make a huge difference, but I actually really enjoyed the crafty, creative side of stamping these book plates. And so that's something that I think I will do again.
Yeah.
And also like getting flooded with emails from people who want me to join their book clubs, and I'm starting to have to say no. And so it's like I'm just trying to figure out where that line is on what commitments to take on versus what to respectfully decline.
Right. Yeah, it takes some practice, but you'll get better at it, I'm sure. I loved your book. I loved The Lost Apothecary. I was one of the lucky who got to read it early. I need to talk about poisons. Poisons. I mean, if I need to off someone, can you help me out? Do you have knowledge?
Yeah, I do. I actually have a couple of resources here because I love talking about poison. And it's actually funny. I know
it's a quote. If we had a quote board, that would go up there. I love talking about poison.
And I need to add to that my critique partner and I have this thing where we always do hashtag things authors say, because no one else would say stuff like that. It's hilarious. Anyway, so you have a couple resources, you said.
Yeah, because I have no formal knowledge in pharmacy or medicine. I love that little quote at the bottom. That's cool.
You've been quoted.
I have no formal knowledge, so I had to learn all this from the ground up. But I mean, if you've got an apothecary in a story and she's sinister, which that's the base of the story. I knew when I started, I wanted to write about a sinister apothecary. To me, the only route to take that is she has to sell poisons. I mean, she's got all these beautiful vials and jars with these tinctures in them. So naturally, she's going to go down the poison route. So and also when I started drafting this book, I could not think of many stories in contemporary fiction that centered around poison. And so I felt like it was kind of an area that readers would be interested in that hasn't been tapped out. So one of the books that I loved, it's called Wicked Plants. And the author is Amy Stewart. And she's also written a book, I think, with cocktails that include plants and herbs. And I heard her talk at VoucherCon in St. Pete a couple of years ago. So Wicked Plants, this is just a fun little book. It's pretty thin with all sorts of toxic plants, many of which you probably have in your backyard or are growing along, the sides of the road. So this is a super fun one. And then for anybody who wants to know more about actual poisoning cases in Britain in the 18th and 19th century, this one is called The Secret Poisoner, and it's by Linda Stratman. And so this is, there's probably about 15 or 20 real life cases in here where she kind of introduces you to the scene of there's this dinner party with this person and the wife served this certain poison in the gravy or what have you. So it was really just interesting to learn about some historical cases so that I could then kind of take a step back and think, all right, what parts of this book do I want to fictionalize and incorporate into my own story? So those are a couple of resources. But then the last thing I would say for anyone who wants to research poisons is, as a historical fiction author, I am so impressed with the number of documents that libraries and museums have digitized online. So you would be amazed if you just start Googling or going to library websites and look at what material they've digitized. It's very possible you can find old documents that relate to what you need. So in my case, I was looking up what's called a pharmacopoeia, which is basically an encyclopedia of drugs or poisons that kind of old pharmacists would use. So that was very interesting and gave me more of a historical perspective instead of a modern day perspective.
Which you really needed both for the book.
Mm-hmm.
How did you, speaking of, I'm sure you've talked about this, but I haven't spoken to you about this. So I would like to know how you did the 3 perspectives. Did you write sort of linearly through the story, or some people do this other thing, which I find I usually write fairly linearly, but some people will write a whole perspective that, like if they have 2 or 3 or 4, and then they twine them together. That seems like a nightmare to me. How did you handle that?
So I wrote, there's, for anyone who's not read the book, there's 3 different points of view. There's the apothecary in 1791, and she's kind of this older, grieving, vengeful woman. And then there's a 12-year-old customer named Eliza. So her voice needed to be a lot younger, a lot more playful and inquisitive. And then there's our present day narrator, Caroline, who she's in London on an anniversary trip, except she's alone. Her husband isn't with her, and you can read why. So because those voices were all so different, I took what, Heather, you just said is the more challenging route, in your opinion, and I wrote their voices one at a time. So I told as much of the apothecary's story as I was able to, then as much of Caroline's story as I was able to, and then actually Eliza was the 3rd character that I decided needed to be a part of the story. And so I kind of wove her in between. And I think actually she has, in terms of word count, I think she has the least word count of the 3, but she's actually my favorite character, and she was so fun to write. So I when I drafted the story, I wrote each of them on their own, and then through the revision and editing process, I kind of blended them and made sure that I wasn't giving away clues or spoilers too early in the story.
I'm wondering, would you do that again in that manner? Or
right now I'm trying to figure out if what's that?
So, on your first, you're kind of learning, you again learn what not to be a different way. It worked well for you? Obviously, the book's beautiful, but
it worked.
That again?
It worked well. It was very challenging. I've decided for my next project, I'm going to go with one timeline. Now, I think that I love writing multi-points of view, but I think I'm going to take a step back for the next project or 2 and just stay in one era, because essentially when you write dual timeline fiction, you're telling 2 completely different stories. So, and then you have to make them connect at the end in an important, meaningful way. That it can't be a minor connection that you just throw in at the end. It has to make sense.
Yes.
So you've got 2 character arcs, you've got all these subplots, but you have 50% of the room in the book to make it all happen. And I can't tell you how many times I just shook my head and I was thinking to myself, why am I doing this to myself? Why did I go with 2 timelines on my debut novel? So
the story wants what it wants, though, doesn't it?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, it works beautifully. You did a great job. I think I read half the book in one night, and I'm a bit of a slower reader just because I guess I'm not slow compared to some. It's all relative, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a freelance editor as well, so I've learned to really absorb what I'm reading and to really pay attention. And so even for pleasure reading, I have trouble. I'm really kind of absorbing what's going on the page, and I zipped through half your book in one night and was like,
I was wondering, because I know you're a freelance editor, and I've sent clients your way, and I always wonder if editors have a tough time enjoying stories once they've done editing for work.
That's actually a great question. I love books. I love stories. I think what happens is I still absolutely enjoy them, but I do always have the editor on in my head. There was a missed opportunity to go with more emotion there, or the structure, they should have done this, that, and that. It's almost there. And if the writing's lovely or if the story's compelling, I can just keep going. But if it's really jarring and it definitely needed a deep edit, then I can't.
Yeah.
But
so it's funny because for anyone who's got the book, if you turn it over and look at the back, there are some blurbs, and Heather is one of them. And then there's also like Kristen Harmel, Kate Quinn. And one of the most terrifying things for a debut novelist in seeking blurbs is that, like Heather just said, these are very, these authors have been they've been writing books for a while. They know what they're doing. They've had their own editorial guidance who've told them, you need to flesh out this character or this scene. So as a debut novelist, to send it out to these people who we really admire and look up to is so intimidating. So that's good to hear, Heather, that I didn't totally miss the mark in your mind.
No, I loved it. And that doesn't change, unfortunately. I'm intimidated when I send out asking for blurbs. Even, people that I know well, I'm always kind of like, I hate this part because they're busy. Yeah. And also, even people I love don't necessarily write books that I love. And that happens too. I mean, but that's okay. We all have different tastes and different styles. And that's the reason why there's so many of us, right?
Yeah.
But then it makes it always a little bit awkward to ask someone because you're thinking, oh, I hope they don't hate it.
I know. It's funny you say that. Just this morning, one of my really good friends in Kansas from college, she said, I'm reading your book and I really love it. And I wanted to tell her, it's okay if you don't. Like, you don't need to be dishonest. If you don't love it, no story is for every single reader. Yeah. So it's kind of funny now that my friends and family are reading it, just kind of wondering, what do they really think?
Right. Just tell them don't go leave a 3-star review on Amazon or Goodreads.
Right.
I've had a couple family members do that. Not close to me, but sort of, and I've had to be like,
yeah.
Well, I know my mom is on this call because I saw her comment earlier. Hi, Mom. And she of course would only leave me 5-star reviews. And I think she's listening to the audiobook right now as well. So she's kind of doing all the different formats.
Love it. Oh, that's what moms are for. I call mine momager. Momager takes bookmarks and puts them all over people's windshields. I mean, she invites her whole yoga class to my book events. I mean, she's momager.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they do, right? So I want to know a little bit more about your book in terms of, I know about it, but for those who haven't read it, tell us a little bit about this idea of poisoning men who have wronged the women in their lives.
Yes. So I think, I probably should have opened up with what the book is about for anyone who's tuning in that doesn't know what it's about. So The Lost Apothecary is about a female apothecary in 18th century London who sells well-disguised poisons to women seeking vengeance on the men who have wronged them. So like Heather just said, there's this element of, not just an element, runs through the whole book, this idea of women come to this secret hidden shop. It's at the back of an alleyway, kind of behind a hidden door in a cupboard. And they sit down in this room with the apothecary and they tell the apothecary what they need. And they often tell her why, kind of like you would with any trusted doctor or counselor. And then the apothecary, whose name is Nella, she dispenses a poison and kind of tells them how to hide it or disguise it in food or wine or what have you. So part of why I really wanted to tell the story in this way is because I wanted to approach this premise with the idea of give these women agency. And in 18th century London, women they didn't have many options to empower themselves and to take control of their own situations. And I wanted to change that or show how that could be different. And I mentioned earlier, this is also a dual timeline story. And so the present day woman, she actually does have more options available to her. And so through her narrative, we see how she is taking control of her situation. So in many ways, the dual timeline of these women with no options and then a woman with options, it's sort of like a compare and contrast. And we see as these two timelines run together, we see the historical women kind of taking a sinister approach. And then we see our present day woman kind of revisiting her dreams and passions from when she was younger and asking herself, how could I fulfill those now? And what changes could I make now? So it was very much, I wanted to compare and contrast the options available to women throughout the last few centuries.
And you did a great job. Yeah, it
Thank
really
you.
comes through. Yeah. Do you have, this is your first novel, do you have a trunk novel? Most writers have a trunk novel.
I sure do.
Oh,
I
you?
sure do. So back, I mentioned the Historical Novel Society conference in 2017. That was when I was working on my trunk novel. And I think what you mean by this is a novel that never got picked up. Is that?
Yeah, or for whatever reason, you never continued forward with it, and it hasn't seen the light of day for a variety of reasons.
Right. So I wrote a full manuscript, and I queried about 130 agents with that manuscript, and I got some bites. And what I mean by that is, requests to see the full manuscript, but it was continually thanks, but no thanks. And one of the messages that I took away for those agents who gave me a little bit of feedback on the book was that the characters in that story, who were women, did not have agency. And so that was exactly why with The Lost Apothecary, my very first thought was, these women are going to have agency. I am not going to repeat this and get the same feedback with this book. And so what better way to give a woman agency than give her a way to secretly kill someone that is on her bad side.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's an easy trap to fall into for historical novelists, because women were so we were under so many rules, and regulations, and social mores were so different from today that I think it's very easy to have society sort of be the bad guy in a historical novel and fall into the trap of things happening to the character rather than the character moving through a plane, a space, and you just sort of bending the space to what she wants it to be, right? Yep. So it takes some time to learn that. I had a similar thing with Josephine, my debut, Josephine Bonaparte. I mean, she lived during the French Revolution. Talk about a victim of your times. But I had to create a character that was not a victim. And at the end of the day, she really wasn't. She controlled much of her fate. But I had to learn the same exact lesson myself.
So do you have trunk novels, Heather?
I don't.
Okay.
I have. So Josephine was the first thing I ever worked on. And it did get published. I think I'm an oddity that way, but I also started, I started writing 10 years after my first career. And I think too that I do have 80 pages of a YA novel that I never finished. Okay. You could kind of call that a trunk novel. I love the premise still. Maybe I'll write it one day, but I've looked back at it and it's just horrendous. I mean, I more or less have to scrap the whole thing and start over, but at least I like the premise, So
right. There you go.
You can kind of call that a trunk novel. I think 80 to 100 pages, something like that. That's sitting.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Anissa. Hi, Anissa. It's nice to see you again. She's wondering why, Sarah, did you choose 1791 in particular for the past narrative? Was there a significance to that date?
Yes. Hi, Anissa. She's been so supportive and lovely throughout this entire journey, not only for me, but just for the debut authors who've been putting books out, and not even debuts, just all authors. So thank you so much for tuning in. 1791. So I'm a big fan of George in London. And in 1791, that was when King George III was on the throne. And it's really kind of an untapped era in fiction, historical fiction. So we see a lot of World War II, a lot of Victorian London, a lot of the Tudor era with Anne Boleyn. But we very rarely, I feel like, see George in London. And so I have actually been researching that era and reading about that era for the last 5 or 6 years, and have always just kind of, it's got a fond spot in my heart. There's no particular reason that I can think of other than it's just kind of scandalous and mysterious because we don't see it much written about in novels. And so I had this interest already in that time period. And then when I started researching about poisons at the beginning of writing The Lost Apothecary, I made a very serendipitous discovery, which was that the ability to detect poisons during an autopsy and really the whole science of forensic toxicology did not exist until about the 1850s. So I could not set this story into the 1850s or later, because an apothecary who dispenses poisons, she would not have been able to continue on with that type of work. So this was actually a perfect time period to put this story in, because she could get away with her work. So it was really the confluence of both my interest, but then also what would have been reasonable during that time period. And something that's interesting, if you look at the bills of mortality for the late 1700s, when the book is set, you almost see no poisoning homicides because they didn't have the science to detect it and to make that determination. But I am 100% convinced that there were lots of poisoning homicides. They just couldn't declare it such. So I think that this really is just the perfect time frame for the book.
Makes sense. Yeah. You always gotta get technology into there, and it's kind of like the challenge of cell phones today that authors are up against. It's like, well, you can't do the poison thing later on, and
that's a good point. As technology evolves, the things that we start to see in novels. So you see now not only dialogue, but you'll see little text message interactions in fiction nowadays. There's even a few text messages in The Lost Apothecary. You also see webcam scenes. So I'm thinking of Jessica Strasser. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. One of her recent novels had a scene with a webcam. So as technology evolves, it's kind of cool to see how authors are working that into their books.
Yeah. I know that thriller writers have had a heck of a time, because now you can't just drop off the grid.
Right.
I mean, it's very difficult. You could, but it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So,
and there are books coming out where people do the DNA test through Ancestry.com, and their results skew their life choices. It's really interesting if you think about it. I mean, in The Lost Apothecary, we're just talking about forensic toxicology, but anything science or tech, I wonder in 50 years, what are authors going to be having to incorporate into their books as things have changed?
Yeah, definitely. So we have a question from Sharon asking, have you thought about another story set in this time, maybe a continuation of this story?
So I get that question a lot, and I definitely feel like there are some unexplored angles in the story in The Lost Apothecary. And I don't want to give away any spoilers, but there are opportunities, I think, surrounding before the story, after the story, alongside the story, that I think would be so fun to revisit. However, I'm sure that Heather can relate to this. You do kind of reach a point where you also want to try something wildly different and go to a different place, a different time. And that's a little bit where I'm at right now. So I don't have a prequel or a sequel that's imminent, but I kind of think of Alice Hoffman and what she's done with Magic Lessons. And it's like this world that it's there. And when she's ready to build something off of it, she does, and it sells very well. But when she wants to do a standalone or something different, she does that too. So I think that the opportunity is there and the door will remain slightly open, but it's not kind of in my immediate future.
So before we go, can we get a little sneak preview from each of you and tell us what you're working on next?
Yeah, Heather, you want to go first?
Well, Jane, you mentioned it when you introduced me. I have, I should probably shout out my collaboration too. So
yes, absolutely. Coming in July.
Is that backwards for you guys?
No, it's forward for us.
How that happens sometimes. Okay, 3 words for goodbye. It's I co-wrote this with Hazel Gaynor. So we write novels together, and we also write solo novels. We tend to like to do sort of high commercial fun, more fun stuff together, and then do our own sort of passionate projects as solo novelists. But
that's great.
So this is a tale of sisters that are delivering farewell letters from their grandmother as her last wish.
Hmm.
And they set off on the Queen Mary for Paris and deliver a letter. There's drama along the way. They take the Orient Express to Venice. And of course, there's more drama and major family secrets that come to light. And then they head to Vienna. And this is all set to the backdrop of pre-World War II. So you're starting to see fascism in the background. One of the characters is an artist, the other a budding journalist. And then they come home on the Hindenburg.
Dun, dun, dun.
So that comes out in July. It's definitely an escapist read. I think it's a great summer read. And then I have the next ship home, my Ellis Island novel that comes out in February. And I spent a lot of time in the New York Times archives digging around. A lot of time at Ellis Island. I know the librarian.
Oh my gosh. I went there a year ago and it was, oh my God, could live in there. It's incredible.
Yeah, the first time I went, it left such an impression on me that I knew at some point I'm going to be back. And that was back when I was a teacher.
Wow.
And yeah, so I'm very excited about that book. I love that book. I love the characters. I can't wait to share it.
Great. Well, we can help you share it here. So
I was just telling someone earlier, I love books that are set on ships. And so to hear, that you've got a couple of stories in that type of scene, I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you. I'll make sure you get a copy, Sarah.
Oh, well, thank you, Heather. I guess that's one perk. Once you start writing and publishing, you get to take advantage of some of these arcs. So I would not say no if that showed up in my mail.
Yeah. All right, your turn, Sarah.
Yeah, so I can't really dive too much into what I'm working on next, but I will say this, that so many of the elements that people love about The Lost Apothecary, which is an atmospheric historical setting, empowered rebellious women, cliffhangers, and kind of a mystery that someone needs to solve, that's very much just where I lean naturally as a writer. Those are the types of themes that I like writing about. So my next project will definitely have all of that. And I think many of the elements that people loved in The Lost Apothecary they will find in my next project. So
awesome. Great. Well,
we'll look forward
to hearing more about it. Yeah, it sounds fantastic. Wonderful. Well, thank you guys both so much for being here, Heather and Sarah. Sarah, again, congratulations. And Heather, early congratulations on your book this summer and the book coming out next year. And best of luck to you both. Best of luck with the rest of your virtual tour, Sarah, and enjoy your day to chill tomorrow. I hope you can sleep late and enjoy
it. So, and it's sunny and hot down there. I'd be hitting the beach.
Yeah. Yes, I did hit the beach a few days ago, which was nice. But I want to echo, Jane, thank you so much for having me on here, and Heather for joining. And it's so cool to have authors that you admire and look up to, and then all of a sudden to find yourself sitting, and having a conversation like this. It's really special. So I appreciate both of you, and for everyone who's tuned in as well today.
Yes, thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.
All right. So long, folks. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.